Kanatami, the representational voice for Canada's 60,000 Inuit, from Nunatsiavut in the east to the Inuvialuit region in the Western Arctic. We're at a very interesting point in time in the relationship between the Government of Canada and its Indigenous peoples, and we're very excited as Inuit to explore the renewal of the Inuit to Crown relationship within the overarching nation-to-nation discussion that the Prime Minister has started. In many ways, we can renew this relationship through governance and through working together in different ways that will allow for greater efficiencies and greater access to programs or services or sort of political voice. That doesn't necessarily cost any money, but there are going to be major investments that are necessary to renew the relationship, and that's what I'm here to talk about today. First off, we have to consider the Inuit-specific lens that we put on any sort of investments that happen in our regions. Every single speech from the throne, every single budget, every major funding announcement we listen to see if the Government of Canada understands the complexity of Indigenous jurisdictions and Indigenous peoples in Canada. And time again, we as Inuit find ourselves left out or only partially covered or covered in a way that does not reflect the realities in which we live in. Whether it's the recent speech from the throne talking about First Nations education instead of Indigenous education, or a Northern strategy that excludes 2 of the 4 Inuit regions in Canada. The terminology that is used and the way in which the specific wording is in budgets or in any sort of announcements has great implications for Inuit, and that if the government would like to do its best for Indigenous people, that it needs to do a better job of how it phrases the work and is honest about who is inside and who is outside the funding envelope. So I believe that Canada can do better in articulating exactly what investments will be for Inuit, what investments will be for First Nations, what will be for Métis, or what will be Indigenous in scope. And it isn't as if we are looking for a relationship that is exclusive or inclusive completely. Well, we don't live on reserves. We have 4 comprehensive land claim agreements that create the governance space for all of our interactions with the federal government. So we do not fall under the Indian Act. But it is very important that right from the beginning, we have a very clear sense of what investments are made for us and not have to figure it out after the fact, because First Nations is used sometimes as instead of Indigenous, or Indigenous is used when it only means certain Indigenous peoples in Canada. I'll speak very briefly about some of our top priorities. The first is in relation to infrastructure. I think Canada still is incomplete in its building process. We do not have the infrastructure in our 53 communities that in the Arctic that many people enjoy in southern Canada. We still don't have ports in many of our communities, even though all but 2 of our communities are marine communities. We still have diesel generation that powers all of our communities. In an age where we're looking to better and cleaner energy alternatives. This is completely unacceptable. We have lack of connectivity or decreased connectivity than most Canadians because of the expense of connectivity in the Arctic and the limitations from the satellites that provide it. We believe that Canada can make investments to ensure that the connectivity in the Arctic is just as good as the connectivity in southern Canada. We also have massive infrastructure issues in relation to getting goods and services in and out of our communities. Just about all of our communities have marine access in the summer and only air access in the winter, fly in, fly out. We have some communities that have ice roads and some communities that do have roads year-round, but those are very, very minute in number. So the investments that Canada makes in the infrastructure in Inuit communities helps build Canada. It helps build sovereignty and the discussion about sovereignty in Canada, but it also allows for economic development to happen. We also have a housing crisis in our regions, and we need large investments in ensuring that we do not live in overcrowding conditions that we are currently under now, where over half of our people live in overcrowded social housing conditions. That brings me to our social envelope, and there are many discussions that have been had over the past 3 or 4 months about improving the lives of Indigenous Canadians and specifically for Inuit. So I will start with the government's commitments of the implementation of the Truth and Reconciliation Commission's 94 calls to action, the implementation on the UN Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples, and the inquiry for murdered and missing Indigenous women and girls. We will expect that the budget will include funding to implement those 3 very large, very comprehensive, and very much needed different scopes of work that will be reflective of Inuit as well as the other Indigenous Canadians in a way that is respectful and comprehensive.
And if I could get you to sum up, we're a fair bit over. If you can sum up pretty quickly.
Sure. We also have a number of different mental health and health-related initiatives that we hope to see funding, especially in relation to suicide and suicide prevention. The last thing I would like to add is Inuit organizations have taken huge hits over the last decade. The framework of Inuit organizations from the community level to the international level have been undercut and undermined by funding cuts, and that this war on our people and the way in which we try to help one another and represent ourselves to Canada and the world needs to end, and we need funding to be able to ensure that we can provide services in the community level and the regional level, and that we can represent ourselves at the national and international levels. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Obed. Mr. Chartier with the Métis National Council. Go ahead.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman, for inviting me to address your committee on the upcoming federal budget and the Métis Nation. The Métis Nation is greatly impressed by the adoption of a Métis Nation policy by the current government. This policy, advancing and achieving reconciliation for the Métis Nation, is a far-reaching plan for the government to work in partnership with the Métis Nation on a nation-to-nation basis